I cannot tell you just how consuming this is, because once you sort of see how unjust it is, and everything we know is about, we need to get more people doing this for their own health, for our air quality, for climate change, and just because it's nice, it's a nicer way to get about, as you and I know. But people aren't being given the dignity of choice to be able to do it, then they've not had their choices taken away from them. And in other parts of society, like, people wouldn't stand for that, but we've managed to slowly design a system where the only really viable way you can get around our towns and cities is in a private motor vehicle, and that just can't be right. So I've just set upon myself giving people options, basically.
This is Andrew Vance, and you're listening to Choose the Hard Way, where the world's top performers share lessons learned at the limits of human experience. High performance is for everyone. You are what you overcome. Choose the hard way. This episode is part of Life Cycles, a new series I've launched within Choose the Hard Way. Conversations in this series cover the topics you've come to expect from Choose the Hard Way, with guests whose lives and careers have been shaped by cycling, or whose lives and careers have shaped the world of cycling. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Subscribe and forward this episode to a friend. That helps the show surface higher in search, so more people can find the inspiring stories of my guests, and I really appreciate the support. Thank you for listening. Go to choosethehardway.com to sign up for the newsletter, and if you'd like to suggest a guest or be in touch, reach out to choosethehardway@gmail.com or DM at hardwaypod on Instagram. Before we get to our guest, I want to share a few thoughts. The relationship between humans, bikes, cars, and streets can be polarizing, but it shouldn't be. Humans are built to move. Humans are the original autonomous vehicles. I've been hit by cars while riding my bike 3 different times. And for anyone who rides, getting hit over time is usually a matter of when, not if. I dream of a world where kids and adults anywhere in the United States or around the world can move safely under their own power without fear of a vehicle running them over. Based on the inspired things some drivers have yelled at me while out riding my bike over the past 30 years, I am well aware that not everyone agrees with me. But wherever you land on this issue, I encourage you to listen to this episode with an open mind and to share it with someone in your life who has a strong opinion on this topic. And I guarantee you know someone who has a strong opinion on this topic. My guest is Adam Tranter. He's based in Coventry in the United Kingdom, and he is the West Midlands' first cycling and walking commissioner. Appointed by the mayor of the West Midlands, Adam works with policymakers and the government to steer the region's cycling and walking policies and plans. Adam is a former national-level elite cyclist and grew up training and racing with riders who've competed in and won the Tour de France and other major World Tour level races. He's also founder of the UK communications agency Fusion Media and co-host of the Streets Ahead podcast on active travel. You can find a link to the Streets Ahead podcast in the show notes. The best place to find Adam is at Adam Tranter on Twitter.
This is quite very new to me. I've been doing this sort of like 4 and a bit months, but I am the cycling and walking commissioner for the West Midlands. The West Midlands is a region at the heart of England. It includes the city of Birmingham and some other quite large towns and cities in and around. It's about 4 million people, and this stems from, like, before this, is I've just been campaigning for change where I live and wanting better provision for active travel, cycling and walking. And I've just been shouting a lot, basically saying like, we should do this, and kind of campaigning hard. And now I'm in a kind of an amazing position where the mayor of the West Midlands has said, "Go on then, go and do it." And that's the position I'm in right now, where trying to really try and accelerate the infrastructure we have, because it all stems from infrastructure ultimately. Because if we provide a nice environment for people to do this stuff in, we know that they'll do it. I've been given money. I've been given budget from central government. Just recently, we've been given £254 million over the next 5 years to put into schemes that will enable active travel. So this is what I'm doing now. I work in the public sector. I work for local government, and trying to get change to happen quickly because of all the reasons already, which to do with inactivity and air quality and climate change. Cycling especially can be the kind of miracle pill for all of those things. It meets so many policy objectives, as people would say. So we're going to crack on and we're going to do it. And we're going to get more people cycling and walking in the West Midlands.
Why did this become really the center of your life? Why did everything shift for you in this direction? Why is it important to you?
Yeah, you definitely can't. Once you see this stuff and you see that, like in many cases, the unfairness and inequality of the system, you can't unsee it. So it started with a couple of things. One is with my kids going to the local school, and the local school to me is about 1.2 miles. And I thought, hey, be great if I could cycle them to school. Let's be real. I'm not going to let them cycle independently, or I'm not going to cycle with them on the road. But I've got a cargo bike, so I'll put them in that. And then I worked out that in order to, first of all, I did that in the cargo bike because I'm a pretty confident cyclist, I guess. I've been doing it all my life. And I got to school and people were like, wow, because I had a cargo bike, I was from the future or something. They were like, wow, what's that? It's a bicycle that can carry small humans. And I'm like, yeah, it's a cargo bike, and they have them a lot, in the Netherlands and Denmark and things like that. And a lot of parents came up to me and said, oh, I'd love to cycle, or I would do it, and there was always this reason, and this reason time and time again was safety. And then my kids got a little bit older, to the point where they could probably cycle on their own bikes with me with them, and wanted to do it. So I said, okay, cool. And as I say, the school is just over a mile away from where we live. And I plotted a route because that's what I wanted to do to make sure it was safe. And the route was 4.2 miles. So, the amount of time, extra time I had to take, but also I had to go and risk assess this route in my head as well to get to the school, and basically tripling the distance that it should take to get there, just to keep my children alive, to get them to school. And I thought, this is messed up. This is messed up. So a part of that route was a mile. The last mile was through a park which has banned cycling since the early 20th century. So the whole system was just screwed up, and I thought, this is ridiculous. So I started to kind of campaign for change. And then another thing, I had a friend who's a transport engineer, and we were just walking down the road, and I said, oh, it's really annoying where I live. The cars, people in cars go so fast through this roundabout. And he's like, yeah, look. And he showed me how it was designed. He said, look, it's been designed so that cars can go as fast as possible through that roundabout without reducing speed to make the cars, less congestion, all these things. I'm like, okay, but this is my community. Why do we want them to go so fast through here? And it's like, well, this is how people have designed streets for decades. So now when I'm walking around, I'm like, why did we do this? I'm looking at the street and going, this is bad. The speed limit says 20 miles an hour, and we've designed the street so that people can comfortably do 40. And we wonder why no one wants to go to their local high street, or why no one wants to cycle and walk in their local community and they just do the easy thing, which I don't blame them for. They jump in the car instead. They don't take their kids to school by bike because it doesn't feel safe, so they take them in the car instead, which adds to the feeling that it doesn't feel safe for other people. So it's just this perpetual cycle, and as you can see, like, it's quite consuming. So I thought, well, what can I do about it? So I started locally, kind of fighting and trying to get better cycle provision. And then I thought quickly, I was like, well, this feels like a bigger problem than just where I live. So, I started to look into what I could do from a kind of advocacy point of view. And I became what's known as a bicycle mayor for my city of Coventry, which is the city I'm from. It's the nearest city to where I am. And I did that for nearly 2 years. And now I'm on the journey where, I'm appointed by the mayor as a cycling and walking commissioner. But I cannot tell you just how consuming this is, because once you sort of see how unjust it is, and that everything we know is about, we need to get more people doing this for their own health, for our air quality, for climate change, and just because it's nice, it's a nicer way to get about, as you and I know. But people aren't being given the dignity of choice to be able to do it. Then they've not had their choices taken away from them. And in other parts of society, like, people wouldn't stand for that. But we've managed to slowly design a system where the only really viable way you can get around our towns and cities is in a private motor vehicle. And that just can't be right. So I've just set upon myself giving people options, basically.
Yeah. And Adam, as we both know, it's the case that many people don't agree with that point of view. They don't think that bicycles belong on the road. A lot of people would prefer to go from sitting down at home to sitting down in a car to sitting down at an office and to have a vehicle take them. My personal viewpoint is that humans are the original autonomous vehicle, and that when we are truly embodied and in our bodies and using our bodies to move, I think that that's when people feel the best. It's when a lot of the best things happen in the world. We're able to connect in a different way. We see each other as human beings. We're not contained in a metal shell. We're on a vehicle where we can interact more. And I am curious, how do you think about that other side of the conversation? People who just truly believe, hey, bicycles don't belong on the road and people should walk on sidewalks or on the shoulder.
Yeah, I mean, the UK has its own challenges with car culture, but I think you guys in the US can take the crown for car-dominated thinking and planning. We still have a small part of us that believes that towns and cities are for people, but we just made some bad decisions in the 60s and 70s and built freeways and things like that. So actually, controversially, I think there's the majority. I think the majority of people are with us actually for this stuff, because when we poll people and we say, like, hey, would you like to cycle more? Like, would you like to would you like to do it? Do you think that we should reallocate road space in order to build cycle lanes? Where we are, we're getting responses around 68% of people agreeing with that. So I think that's a lot of people just crying out for sort of choice, and it's not this kind of culture war that some would want to paint it as. It's just a simple thing, and cars are great, right? Like cars are really successful for a reason, and they they serve a vital purpose in many cases, but we're just using the wrong tool for the job. So where we are in the West Midlands, 41% of car journeys are under 2 miles, and in Birmingham, the city, 25% of car journeys are under 1 mile. So, we are using the car for totally the wrong purposes, where we could be walking or cycling that journey in very quick times. And that's partly down not to the individual choices and individual beliefs of anybody, whether they should be cycling on the road or whatever they think, but that's because of the choices we've made as policy professionals. We've decided to build out of town malls that you have to drive to. We've decided to build these stroads, which are, nothing, not quite a street, not quite a road, and don't serve anybody other than just mediocrely carrying motor vehicles, and doesn't really work for anyone that well in society. And we've kind of made those decisions, and it's us that can turn them back. And it doesn't have to be about, what you identify with as your mode of transport, because we've designed all of this stuff out. So, you go to a hotel and you check in and they say, oh, hey, yeah, welcome, your room's on the first floor. The lifts are over there. And you just get in the lift and press the button, and it goes up for like 5 seconds, and you're out again. And the stairs are right at the back of the building. Like they're hidden away. You can't find them unless you ask for them. Or, there's a fire. That's the only reason you'd need the stairs, right? And we've designed that out, and our jobs are a lot less manual now, and our health is suffering as a reason, as a result of this. So even if people don't want to do it, there's ways that kind of our built environment would encourage them, or just make them not even think about exercising or doing it if we designed it differently. So yeah. And then finally, there are people out there who don't want this stuff, and they are very against it. And don't get me wrong, we get critics and stuff like that, and that's sort of fine. But what I don't want to make the mistake of is thinking that, everyone deserves to be listened to. And that's why we do consultations, but you will never get everybody with you. That's just, there is no policy that any politician could name me that everybody is totally behind it. Things, sometimes you just got to make the bold decisions. And we've got the climate emergency, we've got air pollution crisis in a lot of our towns and cities, and we've got an inactivity crisis as well. And we know there's something that we can do to make that better. So we have to do it, even if it's not popular with everybody. And there's lots of examples in history, like the smoking ban. We used to be able to smoke in pubs. That was really unpopular. Like when we said, hey, we're going to stop you from smoking inside pubs. But now, can you imagine being able to smoke indoors in a restaurant or a pub? And we know that's better for our health. We know it was unpopular. We did it anyway. And that's what we've got to do, because this is bigger than just conjecture. We have the data to back this up, that this is a good thing. And we need to bring as many people along with us as possible, but not to fall into the trap of thinking that this is going to be for everybody and everyone's going to love this, because they're not. We should just be realistic.
So this is part of where your relationship with the bike and with cycling has taken you in your life. But I'm wondering, where did that relationship start? When did you first fall in love with cycling?
So like most kids, I guess I learned to ride a bike when I was, 4 or 5. I got a picture of me with a bike with stabilizers on, and but really the reason it's such a big part of my life is because of my dad, who it wasn't part of his life growing up at all, actually, but he had a friend at school whose dad was really into cycling, and they used to take them to the velodrome. Basically, we had a cycle track in Coventry. We had lots of cycle tracks in England in the Victorian times, basically, and there's some of them stayed until the 70s and 80s, but unfortunately some of them got knocked down. But basically, my dad used to go to the velodrome, and then when I grew up, he used to take me to a different local velodrome, and I used to race bikes when I was 6, 7, 8, and I just raced bikes. It was kind of like all I knew. So if you ask me what I wanted to do, I wanted to be a professional cyclist. But the major problem with that is, as I was getting to the kind of end of whether I needed to choose a job, basically, I kept finishing like 37th in all the races. So I was never going to be able to kind of actually make a career from it. But, I could show up. That was sort of fine. But it definitely wasn't going to be my thing. So I got into it through my dad and through the sport side. And then my my business, which is what I set up basically because I had no other transferable skills other than knowing a lot about biking, is a communications agency. That's how we know each other. And I set that up. And we've been focusing on the sport of cycling for the first, 8 years of our existence, which was set up in 2008. And then we've got to a point where it becomes about getting more people on bikes, but all the same people are getting on the bike. So it becomes that middle-aged man in Lycra, which is totally fine. But people in their head have an idea of like what a cyclist is. And I just realized that getting people on bikes is such a joyous experience for lots of people that, and it can do so much social good as well, that we've kind of transferred. We still do the core cycling stuff. We still do the kind of sport recreation side. But now, it focused on active travel. So I don't want to kind of come across as you have to be involved in the sport of cycling to appreciate, really you go to the Netherlands and you say to people, are you a cyclist? And they'll look at you like you're mad because they are just people using bikes to get to places. So you don't have to have all that kind of passion, the love of bikes. Really, it just needs to be the most convenient way to get around. But that's just happens to be how I learned that it's the most easy way to get around.
Yeah, and Adam, I know you're a pretty matter-of-fact guy, but there are a couple of things in there I'd like to dig into. And, when you were a young person, you were involved on the sports side, as you said, you got involved at a really young age. What did you like or what did you enjoy about that sensation of being on a bike, whether it was just being out on a ride, competing on the velodrome? What did it bring to you? What did you like about it?
I'm not sure. I feel like it feels like it's a different person doing it, actually. I was so young. I guess it was all I knew, really. And I enjoyed the camaraderie. Like I enjoyed, and that's something that remains this day. Like I like how it's an inherently, even when you're racing, it's a sociable activity and thing to do. I guess I liked to know how good I could get at something. And I know that, the more work you put in, the better you became. But I don't think conversely, I don't think I had the brain for it either, because, it involves a lot of discipline. And I've got, discipline in spades, I think, when it's needed, but it's a certain type of discipline to sort of, I almost feel like taking your brain out for 5 hours on a Sunday to go and ride 100 miles. Like that's just, I was bored after 30 miles, so I just didn't, my brain would just keep going. So I just don't think I was built out for it. And actually it caused me lots of, I can call it probably anxiety now. It's not, anxiety in a sort of medical sense, I guess. But, I used to get quite nervous about going to do races and like, was I be good enough? And like, this is constant. So I guess I got put into quite, not conflicts, but I got quite into quite high pressure environments. And that's why I say that, that's probably also the reason that I stopped doing it as well, because like, I just wanted to just, and I came back to bikes very quickly. Like when I quit racing in my teens, like, I quit, like I sold my bikes and stuff, but then I came back to it like, just over a year later. But I did it on my own terms and I just did it because I liked doing it. So yeah, I learned a lot from that process about myself, but I also feel like it is like a different human that was doing it. It's weird.
And when you were in your teens and you made that decision to quit, is that when you were having that experience of, you were, as you said, you were coming in like 36th, 37th in races? Was that around that time?
Yeah, exactly. So I was about like when I was at like I don't know, still make or break point of view. I guess I was probably about 17, and a lot of people I raced with went and became pros. I my name's on the sheet with people who have won stages at the Tour de France, but I just was never there. I was just making up the numbers basically. So it was kind of nice, and it's an achievement in itself. But yeah, it's, everyone's got that sort of, knows somebody who, there's lots of people who were scouted at football and stuff like that, and you just to make it, you've got to be really, really good, which I was probably a couple of notches down from being, and you've got to have like the unrelenting focus on that's what you want to do. And I guess I'd already decided, like I'd go to race, and then I'd stop and take photos of the races, because like I got into like the media side of things, and that's how I fell into like writing as a journalist and then doing the comms side. So already I was like, hey, what else can I do, basically? So yeah, I don't want to paint it as this sort of, on the cusp of greatness, and it was only a millimeter that stopped him from going to the Tour de France. It really was not. I was just a kid, doing a hobby with other kids, and some of those kids went and rode the Tour de France, and I just wrote about them instead, which is fine with me.
At the time, did it feel like that? Did it feel like a relief when you walked away, or did some part of you feel a more complex feeling about it?
No, it felt like I remember it felt like a relief. Felt like I moved to London when I was like 18, 19 maybe. Sold all my bikes, used the money that I sold for my bike to pay my rent in London, and I had just about enough money left to buy some baked beans and some beer. So I did that basically, and started my business, and then that consumed me, because I'm like, well, I want to be good at this, and I want to do that. So very quickly, yeah, I got over it, and it felt like a relief.
When you moved to London, did you have a plan?
No, not really. I knew that I had a nice safety net, because I knew that I could come back. I knew that I could come back at any point, because I lived with my parents. But I left with basically £400. I exaggerate, about £600 and about £1,000 in savings from the bike. And I knew I could pay my first month's rent with the money that I had. But I knew that once I was there, I needed to get money in straight away. And there were some really good people that I'm still, I work with to this day, and I'm friends with, who soon as I moved, I was talking to them for a while saying, oh, this is what I'm thinking of doing. They were like, oh, okay, keep us posted. And then as soon as I moved, they were like, oh, hey, we could do with someone who could write some stories for us, or do this website, or whatever. So I didn't have a plan, but I guess other than just month by month, I wanted to sort of not survive, but I wanted to be able to pay my rent, because that was kind of like, not a mathematical genius, but that's kind of important. And anything was a bonus. And then it just, it started to get exciting. Like, and cycling, because when I started doing this, cycling was just a thing that you and people like nerds like you and I were interested in. And then all of a sudden, around the time of the Beijing Olympics in 2008, which is when I was getting started, cycling became like a pretty popular thing. Like, people are like, oh, you know a lot about this cycling stuff. That's great. Like, tell us. And it's like, obviously all I know. It's the only skills that I have. I didn't go to university or anything like that. I just, that's what I know. I know a lot about cycling. So it was really helpful, really good, fortuitous timing at that time. And then, because of that, it started to take off, I guess, in a way.
And if you think about what you're doing now and what was going on in the world at that time, like around 2008, say, what was happening with pedestrian transportation, people getting around on bikes in the city? Was that even on your mind at all at that time?
Yeah, because when I moved to London, I still worked out very quickly that the quickest way to get around was by bike. So I didn't have a car, and I rode my bike everywhere. And I rode into central London. My commute, when I say I lived in London, I lived in the furthest bit you can get where you can say I live in London. So I did like a 10-mile commute into central London, and realized that the bike was the quickest way. And I remember very specifically the change, because I could count, it could be a situation where I was cycling, I would know people who were also doing it, kind of thing. It was sort of, it wasn't like it was a rare thing to do, but it certainly wasn't like the thing to do. So I actually remember when cycling really started to become quite a popular thing in London, that for me, I was quite taken aback by it, because I'd been used to being what's called a vehicular cyclist. I was cycling as if I was a car. And then all of a sudden, all these other people started cycling, and they started doing stuff that I'd been taught was like bad stuff. I've been taught, like, don't ever undertake somebody on the inside, for example. Like, so I'd be riding like in my lane, not even the lane, because there weren't really any bike lanes, but I was like riding a meter from the curb, because I'd been taught not to ride close to the curb. And then some dude on a bike would go on the inside of me to kind of go on the inside. And he had this kind of like thing where people weren't indicating, or, weren't looking behind them before they turned left or pulled in on the left, and stuff that I thought was important, because I'd grown up as a cyclist. So I've been taught, like, at cycling clubs, like, here's how you signal there's a pothole, and here's how you turn, make sure your club mate knows you're turning right, and here are all these weird like hand signals that you have to kind of communicate in some sort of secret code. And then I got to London, all these people were doing, I'm like, well, they're not following the code. What is wrong with them? And then I realized that actually what I thought was cycling and what they thought was cycling were totally different things, and that was a real epiphany for me, because I realized that the way to keep cyclists safe is not to teach them weird hand signals, but is to give them good infrastructure that was put in on, separated from traffic, from motor traffic, and protected. And then, stuff started to happen with that, and I started to use it, and then everyone started doing it, and then it became a proper mode of transport, I guess, which obviously cycling has been before, but in my lifetime has been, not something that many people have done, to the point of where we are now, where we've obviously seen a huge change during this, and more recently through the pandemic. And I don't want to say like it's a cycling, haven. This country is very patchy at best, but like with the US, you have places, New York and maybe Portland, or places that kind of like are beacons and show what's possible when you start making an effort. And I think that's where we are now, really.
And what would you like to see happen with cycling in the UK? Like, with where it's at now, where do you want it to go?
Yeah, so I'm really interested, because of the marketing and communications side, I'm really interested in this idea of normalizing cycling. So, and it happens through infrastructure, because more people do it and it just becomes more normal. But I really like the idea that people wouldn't, if you ask people to draw what a cyclist looks like, they wouldn't just draw a guy in fluorescent lycra and socks that are really high and all of this kind of cliche stuff. They might just draw a person going to work, or they might just draw a person going to the shops with a bike with a basket on the front, or something like that. So normalizing cycling, I think, is not only a goal for me, but a byproduct of success as well. Like, once we are in some sort of cycling culture, then I think people will start to see that it's just a great way to get around, and you don't need to be signed up to any sort of club or a member of any sort of establishment to be part of it. So I think that's a real kind of goal for me in terms of normalizing it, and that actually links to a lot of some of the problems in sort of the narrative and keeping cyclists safe, is that people cycling. I try and say people cycling as opposed to cyclists, but for that very reason, like, I'm not a busist. I don't, you're just a person who rides a bike, but people who cycle, are pretty much, I think, one of the few groups left that you can identify and make fun of because they're a minority group, and that's awful. Like all forms of, I'm mindful not to kind of position, taking the Mickey out of cyclists as in the same vein as a hate crime or racism and horrific stuff like that. But if you think about it, even vegans, right? Like people used to take the Mickey of vegans, and now, like, very quickly we've grown out of that very sensibly, because it's quite plausible that your best friend or your boss's daughter is a vegan. So we've stopped sort of taking the piss out of vegans. But cyclists, they're one of the few groups that you can still say, oh yeah, cyclists, they're idiots, aren't they? And people go, oh yeah. Like, how is that possible? How is that acceptable? So one of the barometers for me is making sure that changes. And I guess for the goal, really, because I have to have literal measurable targets, is a central government target, but we've adopted it, which is that by 2030 we want 50% of all journeys in towns and cities to be walked or cycled, basically. So that's what I want it to look like, and that will mean that it's normal and it's an everyday thing to do, and it's the most convenient and direct and safe option for people.
You've made an interesting distinction between cyclists and maybe people who self-identify as cyclists. It's a core part of their identity and who they think of themselves as, versus people who ride bikes or people who cycle. And as you noted, you kind of grew up in a high performance environment. Eventually you decided to leave that. And I know that there are also other activists and people on the policy side in the UK, like Chris Boardman, who have competed at the very highest level, who are among the best cyclists of all time. And, the UK today continues to be a hotbed of elite cycling and producing some of the best riders in the world. Is there a crossover coming back in from that level of the sport into the space that you're in? So are there people who are on the high performance side? Like, I don't know, for example, if Sir David Brailsford is involved in initiatives around cycling and walking for transport, but is there anything happening on that side of the support that's supporting what you're doing?
So in some ways it's helpful and also a hindrance, because, it perpetuates the view that cycling is this kind of elite thing. So Chris Boardman really, I think, it's a fact, so no one's wrong, but he doesn't like it, because when people say it's Olympic medalist Chris Boardman, he's like, okay, yeah, but you invited me to talk about how we get more children walking, for example. So the fact that I won a gold medal, not me obviously, but Chris Boardman won a gold medal, is irrelevant to the subject matter, but it gets you in the door, which is what Chris says. Often that's like, you've got this kind of interesting thing, and for many people that's what cycling is. So you can start to, part of this is just getting in the right places and having a conversation. So Chris has been very instrumental. I take lots of inspiration and get lots of advice from him in how to sort of move this agenda on. And I think for him, his story, I've listened to it and heard it quite a lot, is that sort of fight for betterment is a helpful skill to have in these sort of roles, because as commissioners we're sort of slight outsiders. We're slightly weird in a sense, because I didn't set out to work in the public sector. I wasn't growing up going, I want to work in local government, that's what I'm going to do. And even now I'm doing it, I'm not really of the system. So I'm here to question the system. So, for Chris Boardman, it was about like how to be more aerodynamic or whatever. And he's using those tactics and techniques not to be literally more aerodynamic, but to understand, the example he gives is he made some changes in the wind tunnel that would make the British cycling team faster. But he went and told everybody, oh, look, I've got this great thing. All you got to do is wear this different hat. And almost no one wore the hat. And he was quite frustrated by that because he's like, well, I've told you that it's really good. But then he got everyone into the wind tunnel and showed them and made them think, well, what if we do this and tweak? So everyone was there watching and going, oh, I'm part of this. And then they all wore the hat because I don't know if it was a hat actually, but they all did the thing because they were there and they felt part of it. So I think you learn a lot in that environment, and that approach to betterment is quite helpful. We also have Dame Sarah Story, who's the new Manchester commissioner, taking over from Chris. She was a commissioner for Sheffield City region, but you also have people that aren't from that background. So I think it's about it's parts of it are maybe about a high performance thing, but I think sports people have never been afraid to like challenge themselves and challenge other things, because you constantly have to like reinvent. You can't sort of sit still really. So maybe there's something, I don't for a minute put myself on the same pedestal as Chris Bourman and say Dave Sarah Story. They're like two of the most successful sports people on earth. But I think there's something, anyone who's kind of like competed at any kind of level has wanted to be better at it and learn from it. The other unique thing about cycling, which drives you, is even if you cycle just for sport, you can come in to contact literally with some of the issues that are really prevalent in this space. So there's been a horrific amount of professional cyclists who've had their careers ended or shortened or put on hold because they've been hit by a car driver, because we share the same road. So there is a uniqueness, I think, in that a relativity that everyone's experienced and gone, actually, if I could do something about this, I would. And I think that's also got to be part of it. But the experience of a professional sports person is also very different. So every year, generally, a sports person gets asked like, "Oh, do you think helmets should be mandatory?" And they say, "Yeah, sure, absolutely. I always wear a helmet. And when I crashed down an alpine descent, it saved my life." And that understanding is very different to the risks associated with getting literally half the population to cycle a mile to the shops. The risks are not the same, so we shouldn't treat them the same. So it's pros and cons, but there is definitely some overlap.
Yeah, I mean, tragically here in the States, we had a very high-profile journalist who was struck and killed by a train just this past week, which was horrific. He was out on an actual training ride, I believe. But yeah, it happens all the time. Gosh. It's tragic. And, another thing that you're highlighting, and I mean, I think this is one of the ways in which you're really uniquely suited for what you're doing right now, which is the power of storytelling, of narrative, of communications. And as you kind of told the story of your trajectory, at some point you got off the bike, you're like, hey, I want to take photos of what's happening at this race. And as you said, cycling, you felt like, hey, this is the thing I know the most about. It's what I've always done. And then that kind of became what you did going forward. But what is it about the power of story or storytelling that do you find something to be enjoyable about that? Or is it just a utilitarian thing that you fell into and then you became very good at because it was your profession?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I don't know if this will make any sense to anyone in the US listening, but there's this phrase called the gift of the gab, and you don't have that phrase from the oh, you do have that phrase. Oh, great, we're more alike than we think. The gift of the gab is basically something I think I've had, and that might sound, I'm aware not to sound like arrogant here, but what I would say is I identified what I'm good at and not done the stuff that I'm not good at. So I suck at like science and maths and all of that stuff. But I had good English grades at school. Like that was always a thing. So and then when I was cycling, I was one of the most average cyclists, but I had like some of the best sponsors because like I could sell, like I could understand what people wanted and stuff like that. So I guess I've identified something that I'm good at in the absence of raw talent and focused on it basically. And that's been good. And I guess I've been I did want to be I did sort of want to be a journalist. So, I wanted to be a police officer as well. I just, I went through phases, but, I did think I wanted to be a journalist, and I really like radio. So radio for me was like, I become fixated with like this, just how important it was in society, and like how it could change lives, and just its stature almost. And, I became really interested in journalism, I guess, for that point of view. And I was quite good at English and knew a lot about cycling. So, hey, that's what I'm gonna do, and that's what I did to start with. So I think that led me to learn lots of stuff about communication, but I don't think I really understood. For me, it was just something I did until probably 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. I really understood the importance and transformational nature good communications can have, and started to, I'm not party political by in any sense, but like, really interested in speech writing and things. I'm really interested in the art of communications. And I've identified, I think in cycling especially, that it's been missing. Actually, the narrative has been dominated by people who don't like it, basically, who don't want more bike lanes and things like that. And actually, when you talk to people, you talk to families and say, hey, would you like to be able to cycle to school with your kids? Like, oh yeah, that would sound great. Love it. Where do I sign? And we know through the power of comms that we can bring people with us and persuade people. So storytelling is something that, maybe I don't necessarily identify with the kind of story. Everything's telling a story, right? But I'm more like, how do we get it in 30 seconds? How do we explain what we're trying to do in 30 seconds? And that for me is the most important bit, because that's all you've got to change people's minds. Otherwise, most people don't want to, like when I vote every 4 years or whatever, like it comes in and like, I gotta go and vote. And they're going to vote. Most people are not kept awake at night by this stuff. So if you do get them like, hey, we're going to make your streets better, this is how it's going to benefit you, you've got about 30 seconds before they like ask you to leave. So that's why, the comms I think is so essential, and we've not been able to be pithy before, and that's what I've been trying to focus on.
Was there a moment that flipped the switch for you? You mentioned 3 or 4 years ago that things catalyzed and you realize, hey, there's transformational power and telling the story maybe in a different way. And it sounds like it was around cycling for transport. Was that the thing?
Yeah, I think it's just a mixture of some of the brands that I ended up working with through my agency. So Brompton was a big one. Others that were kind of involved heavily in like the advocacy, I'd say, like side of things, ahead of me. I was inspired by them, and that's what got me into it. And I guess I saw them sort of stand up and say, we're not about building bikes. We're about, we want better cities and more, a better future. And I got really sort of taken in by that, and saw that especially Brompton being like a British brand, like a success story, that it had the ear of like government effectively, because they were a fairly sizable British exporting business that was quirky and stood for a lot of the great things that is great about British innovation. So when I started getting involved with them through work, I was kind of like, oh, people are listening, but if we keep saying like, oh, it's this thing that folds and it's really nice and you can fold it in under a minute, and, look how lovely it is. And we do all our welding in England, and all of these things, like people do care, but no one really cares. But if you say to people, hey, we're Brompton and we currently sell this many bikes, we could sell this many more bikes, and we could literally change a generation societally, are you in? And people go, yeah, cool, sounds good. Like, it's all about the economy, isn't it? And if we get all these policy objectives at the same time, brilliant. So I guess I just realized through some of the stuff I did that we had more of a seat at the table than I took credit for. So I started getting involved in stuff like that, and it became a little bit more public affairs and politics and good old consumer comms and stuff like that, really. So I think they were the moments where I realized that there was something that needed to happen. And I just kept getting like angry because I kept, seeing stuff in the media and going, this isn't right. Like, this is not accurate. This is not who we are. And realized that you could just be angry, which I was, but also, as you know, you've got the skills, similar skill set, like, how the system works. So, and that's what I've been about. Change the system, hold the pen in a case. So whether that's with policy, and now I can say, well, yeah, this is how we're going to do things, and I'm holding the pen and deciding the policy, and it happens. Or in terms of press and comms, it's like, well, if you don't like the stories, like, do better ones, basically. So I've got a good friend of mine who's a Sunday Times journalist, and he obviously gets pitched a lot, and says, a lot of the cycling world that are pitching him are just saying to him what they don't like. They're not tying into what are the stories that work for his readership. So if it's like car stories, it fits his readership. So he might say, well, don't just get angry with it, pitch me something that fits with my readership. So one of the stories we pitched to him was one of the big car rental firms offering Brompton bikes as part of the service offering. And then you can start to have a conversation about whether we actually need cars, and whether we could rent them, or whether actually you even need a car. Even the car companies might not think you need a car because they're renting bikes. So you can have an interesting conversation that's relative to their readership there, or you could just get angry. So we as a business realized that it was a way to kind of dominate the agenda. We just had to sort of know how to hold the pen, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that one of the core tenets of highly effective communications and being a highly effective communications professional is being user-centric, not you-centric. And like, that's whether you're a brand, whether, I was a freelance journalist for over a decade, pitched probably over 1,000 stories. And that's what I learned over time. It's about what the readers need. It's not about what a brand wants. It's not about your point of view as a writer. Like, you have to serve the people for whom you are writing. Otherwise, nobody's going to read it, right? So I think that's a powerful insight. And you mentioned kind of the lofty, elevated status of radio in culture, and like how that's something that was an aspiration, perhaps. And today, you now have your podcast. So can you talk a little bit about the podcast, what you're doing? Yeah, I mean, you're basically BBC now.
But I did this during lockdown, like as a kind of fun project out of boredom and anger. Again, like, hey, no one's talking about this stuff. Let's talk about it. So my podcast, or I say our podcast, I co-host it with Ned Boulting, who presents the British Tour de France coverage and other stuff at the Olympics and Paralympics and football, in fact, as well. And Laura Laker, who's a journalist at The Guardian, and myself, we're all interested in active travel and sort of better cities. So we set up a podcast called Streets Ahead, and we record, monthly, maybe sometimes twice a month. And it's all about walking, cycling, wheeling, all of these things, and how it can make for better urban futures. So, we discover things. Today we recorded an episode on tactical urbanism, things that we can do to make our streets better with low cost in things that can be done by citizens. We also talked about anything from distracted driving, so like the science behind using your phone while driving, autonomous vehicles, and what they might impose on, issues they might impose on cycling, and getting cool people like Chris Boardman I mentioned, and Dame Sarah Story and others on the podcast to talk about what they're doing in their areas to sort of shape a region or shape a nation for active travel. So yeah, and I find it a lot of fun. And yes, that's one of the reasons I wanted to do it. I have always been fascinated by radio speech and just thought, hey, I could do this. And it's not massive, but some people like it, and that's good enough for me. And it's just therapeutic to challenge and to chat and to test ideas, and it's great to have a little forum to do that in.
Yeah, now that you're actually doing it, what is the experience like, and what is it bringing to you that you perhaps were not getting out of other things that you were doing, or is it similar to what you were doing?
In terms of radio, or
Yeah. Just like as a human being, as a professional, like what's it bringing to you? What do you get out of it?
I like sharing ideas and just talking about stuff, and also I use it to test my communication skills, if you like, because I have to not be really boring, and I have to sort of be pithy about what I say and all of those things. So yeah, I think it's just great on the job learning for everything that I'm trying to do, which is to persuade lots of people that active travel is something that we need to be doing and investing in. And there's a real passionate community, and that's really helpful as well, because you do get your fair share of trolls or whatever, people who really don't want this stuff. And it seems to just bring out the worst in some people online and in person sometimes. So knowing, sometimes during lockdown, during the first part of the pandemic, where our streets were actually changing quite radically, it was potentially quite a lonely place to be, because you weren't really going anywhere, and you were sort of fighting this kind of culture war at the coalface. And actually just talking to people on the podcast, or saying stuff, and then people messaging you saying, "Oh, I listened to your podcast," or people just agreeing with your writing in, or whatever it is. It's just really, really reassuring, because you realize that what you want is actually quite a normal thing, and it's not you're not on your own, basically. And I've never really felt that, but during the lockdown, obviously, when you're literally on your own, having some people and chatting them through and chatting about a better future is quite a nice form of therapy, I guess. I enjoyed doing it, and we've kept doing it since.
And Adam, if people want to learn more about you, about the podcast, about the issues we've been talking about today, where should they go?
I'm a Twitterer. I do Twitter. So I'm at Adam Tranter on Twitter, and that will give you a good idea of the kind of stuff I'm up to, whether it's my commissioner job, which, we're talking about funding, schemes that we're doing, things happening on the ground, to, just what's happening in the cycling industry, to just sometimes bad jokes. So yeah, you can get it all on the Twitter, as they say.
If you have questions, comments, feedback, or want to suggest a guest, please reach out to @HardwayPod on social, or email me at choosethehardway@gmail.com. Please take a moment to hit 5 stars in Spotify or iTunes and leave a 1-word review. That helps more people connect with the powerful stories my guests share, and I really appreciate the support. You are what you overcome. Choose the hard way.